when you start any project, you don't always know which scale you will end up with. So you can end up over-engineering your solution.
Anna, what's your full-time job? Where are you scaling apps these days?
Well, I work in the UK FinTech called Tide, and we provide a platform for small and medium business owners to get everything they need to run their business. It can be issuing an invoice, accepting payments, getting credit, and it's a monorepo, purely written with Flutter. As usual with my talks, I always share my experience from work. It's my biggest inspiration.
So you've scaled an application yourself. Tell me a little bit about that.
At times when I joined Tide, they had native applications, Android and iOS, and they were suffering from feature imparity. Having to implement features twice on each platform, fix different bugs on different platforms. And they made a tough decision, I must admit, to rewrite with some cross-platform technology. And they had a few on the list, did the research and landed with Flutter. That's when I joined the company and helped them build the architecture that I'm going to present in this conference to address their need to build a scalable solution.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's a story we've heard a million times.
Yeah.
So what's the architecture you're presenting?
Architecture is built on the concept of Lego, where you have small atomic bricks and you can put them together to form something unique, big, different every time. And they all connect together through a standard interface. That's what makes the entire idea so powerful. So we have also developed our form of this standard interface through which we connect our small features together to form different applications depending on which country and market we are building for.
What are some of the things that you've seen in your Flutter projects that aren't over-engineering at the start? What are the pluggable sort of components that you're yeah, I know I'm going to need a listener that does
analytics, monitoring. First of all, these are the things that we tend to leave out of the core implementation and then only think later. And for example, with us, we first made a kind of imperative approach where whenever an event happens, we explicitly report it and then had to refactor to a global system-wide mechanism that reports on its own and developers don't need to think of it a lot.
That makes total sense. You also answered that perfectly in time with my sentence. So I don't write a lot of apps with analytics, so I don't know how that scales. But are there any others that come to mind of you're starting an app today, what are the things that you already pull out into their own functionality?
Well, actually, in my talk, I start with the fundamental requirements to your solution. It is scalability, maintainability. It has to be of a moderate complexity so you can actually understand what's going on. And AI later can do that too. Efficiency. And I'd rather share these principles so people then can apply them in their own solution. Of course, you need to think of the basics like what state management are you going to use? Is it going to be global? Is it going to be local? Navigation, dependency injection. And the design system is, of course, also a thing to consider when you are getting ready to build at scale.
So we asked online, and I think your talk actually got the most questions.
Oh, really?
So from LinkedIn, a great place for enterprise developers, somebody asked, how are enterprise teams approaching Flutter at scale while keeping performance, testing, and code quality consistent?
I would say the biggest principle is, how do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece, right? So we divide this big problem into smaller pieces. That's the key of our architecture, modularity. And we divide our huge application into smaller pieces, which are much easier to manage individually. And we cover each individual piece with unit tests, so to speak, depending on the definition of union. And then we combine them together and only cover now with tests the sewing parts. So my answer is divide and conquer, basically.
Yeah, I think that's the only way you can. Does that mean you're also dividing by target platform, or how are you thinking about, one of the things that scales Flutter is...
Actually, in this sense, we agreed from the beginning that we are building a tight platform for small and medium business owners. And this notion of Flutter serving different platforms, like where you can write your applications, landed well in terms that we provide the same functionality on all devices, and we only focus on the functionality when we want users to have on our platform.
So when you're bringing something to scale, let's say, you're chasing the next million users of the Tide platform, you're looking at it as, I built it once in Flutter and it's kind of everywhere. And
yeah, exactly. We currently have our mobile applications on Android and iOS, and we are already looking into delivering parts of them as our web experiences. So Flutter really enables us meeting our users where they are.
And I think another thing that maybe is sort of in here about performance, testing, code quality, all of these things at scale is, I would guess that an enterprise like Tide has also done a lot of custom work on the design systems, the way that things visually look, the touch and feel of the app is very custom. That's something Flutter does well.
It is. However, even when we started, we had to really focus on migrating the core functionality, and this is where the material implementation of design already helped us a lot. And of course, we then used it as a foundation for our more custom design system.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I guess when I see this question, I think about performance of, one of the things at scale, one of the hardest problems is keeping up to date, right? Like, my team's out here talking about the newest version of Flutter. Mm-hmm. I would guess maybe you're a version behind, 2 versions behind. That's super normal in an enterprise setting. How do you sort of keep up? Like, how do you keep code at the highest quality with the newest features?
Actually, we have a standard to aim to upgrade Flutter version in the first months after it is released.
Oh, wow.
It, of course, requires some effort. However, the other aspect of developing a scale is having consistent implementation, and that helps a lot with maintenance of all kinds, including upgrading Flutter, including making some changes to the architecture. You solve the problem once and you just multiply it to all the places in the code base.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it actually leads to the other question that we pulled from Twitter or X, which is, I think everyone's favorite. What's the biggest architectural mistake you've seen in large-scale Flutter applications, and how can teams avoid it from the beginning?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say it's like a terrible mistake. However, at scale, you don't want to solve the same problem many times in every place it appears. You want to create a generic solution, preferably a solution that works on its own, somehow magically, by adding listeners, streams, someone subscribed and got all the events. However, at smaller scales, at the start of the project, it may be an over-engineering, and it's when you're starting a project, you don't always know which scale you will end up with. So on one side, being mindful of future challenges is important. On the other side, you can end up over-engineering your solution.
That was a really good answer.